Welcome everyone to another episode of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we're going to be continuing the Naruto Yokai series, Naruto Yokai Shippuden, What If Sasuke Uchiha Was a Girl, Part 4. Now, this part isn't really going to be all that long, as we're mainly going to be covering the pain attack in the Naruto Shippuden area of the story. So this part is mainly only going to cover the pain attack before we get into the war arc as we continue on with the story for the rest of the week, which will culminate on Friday with the finale of Naruto Yokai, What If Sasuke Uchiha Was a Girl. That will cover the finale of the series up into the beginning of the Boruto era. Now, the Boruto portion of this story, when I get that far, is going to look a lot different from the original. While I do want to try to retain many of the aspects from the Boruto series, some things will ultimately be different in the long run. And also, I will not start the Boruto portion of this story until the part 1 ending of Boruto takes place. Now, for those of you who follow the Boruto manga or the anime, then you should know that we are actually approaching the end of the first half of the Boruto story before we get into the time skip. So once we reach that point in the Boruto story, at that point, I will take the Boruto portion and will convert it for this series. Although the one thing I should note is that the child will not be named Boruto, although this will basically be the Boruto portion of the story. Although I will leave that up to you guys. Do you want his name, for the child of Satomi and Naruto to be Boruto? If you want it to be Boruto for simplicity reasons, then I can just keep it as Boruto. Or we can go with the other names that I'll have, in case, you don't want his name to be Boruto. So, that's just something to keep in mind as we continue on with this series. Once we finish here, we'll be starting up some other things that we'll be doing with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Among many things that I need to do is I really do need to wrap up the What If Deku Was a Power Ranger series. I am thinking about rebooting that simply because I do like where the story is, but I feel like if I have a chance to reboot it, I think I might. So, if you guys want me to reboot that series, let me know down in the comments also. I mean, I can continue it. I have no problem continuing the story with the way it is now. I have no issue with that. But if you think that it could use a bit of improvement and I could reboot it, then, I don't mind doing that either. Since, we've already rebooted a number of stories on this channel in just a short time. So let me know what you think about that. And anything else that comes out with Power Core Productions and Podcastings, you just need to stay tuned for the channel. Check the community tabs, as I'll always have new things coming out. New trailers, new openings, new ideas. I do want to make more trailers for concepts, for stories, if you want to see them, like the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Captain America crossover. Those are kind of like a way of gauging to see if you guys would want to see it, a little cool opening idea, and if enough people want to see it turn into a story, then that's what I'll do. So just keep that in mind for everything else that comes out on the channel now and in the future. But anyway, we're going to get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The hideout would be quiet as Satomi came face to face with Danzo. There was much tension in the room, as if this had been the point that events had been leading their fates toward for so long. As Satomi had her sword ready, Danzo would step up to her, noting that he was aware that she had been searching for him for some time, and that just as she had been keeping an eye on him, he had been keeping an eye on her, and that sadly this was the fate of the Uchiha. As it would begin to undo the bandages on his arm, Satomi's eyes would become open and livid at what she was seeing. as the man revealed that his arm implanted were 10 Sharingan, not excluding what was under the bandages of his right eye. Satomi's blood would begin to boil, remembering all of her fallen brethren, her family, her clan, everything that had happened up until now. They could feel the coldness of the air forming around them, as Satomi's own aura would begin to shift. A dark violet glow would begin to emerge around her, as she would begin to form the incomplete Susanoo. Danzo's guards would stand at the ready, unsure of what to expect. However, Danzo would tell them to stay back, as he was going to be the one to finish the Uchiha once and for all. The hideout would then explode as Satomi would lunge and attack towards Danzo. However, she would have to stay in the defensive setting, as her brother was still recovering, or so she thought. Danzo, however, would engage with Satomi in battle. Everything had been leading to this point for a long time. Ever since she were young, Danzo had always seen the potential in Satomi. However, he was never able to get close enough to her, as the third Hokage made sure to keep him at a distance. And what was even worse was that she always hung around that boy, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Danzo had always believed it was foolish to allow things such as love to cloud one's own judgment, believing that the two greatest assets to the village needed to be trained and prepared, and to not indulge in such trivial things. If Danzo had had his way, Naruto and Satomi would have grown up much different. To them, they were no more than a means to an end, and Satomi could see that for all it was worth. Danzo showed that he were rather effective as a shinobi, and one that cannot easily be killed. However, all the same, Satomi was able to wear him down and take his life. However, unknown to Satomi, there were many powers that the Sharingan possessed, ones that even she herself were not aware of. As Danzo would perform Izanagi, losing one of his Sharingan eyes in the process, he would reappear back into the reality of which he had been lost, as the two would continue their fight once again. Satomi giving herself over to the hatred that she felt for the man responsible for destroying her family. The power of the Mangekyo slowly seeping away at her eyesight, causing her to feel immense pains and headaches as she continued to use the Mangekyo to its fullest extent. Danzo, between his summoning jutsus and his wind-style techniques, proved to be hard to deal with. And if it wasn't just for Danzo, it was also his guards, who fought and kept Satomi at length. This proved to be a slow and long-going battle, which was what Danzo had wanted. Now seeing Itachi in such a weakened state, and Satomi potentially on her last legs, it was all about wearing them down. However, while they continued their fight in the forest on the outskirts to the back of the village itself found itself in dire straits, as the one known as Pain of the Akatsuki, along with his 6 paths, would attack from various points within the village. Kakashi, along with Choji and his father, would engage with the Deva path, while the other paths of Pain attacked in various locations. Among the members of Danzo's route, the one known as Sai would be traveling from rooftop to rooftop, attempting to provide aid where he could. While Danzo had not specifically told his men to stay out of the fray, most knew better than to get involved without Danzo's permission. And under normal circumstances, Sai would be doing the same, as he were merely trying to head back to the hideout. However, as Sai was preparing to leave, he would see a young girl trapped under some rubble. He was about to pay it no mind, but for some reason, there was something about her that drew him. As he heard her pleas, and the two made eye contact for the briefest of moments, he knew that he couldn't just turn away. As much as he didn't want to, he would stop and turn back around. Using his Super Beast scroll, he would create an ink-like gorilla to remove the debris. Helping the young girl to her feet, she would reveal herself to be Ino Yamanaka. Sai, remembering that he too knew another Yamanaka in the Foundation, one known as Fu. However, before he could leave, Ino would grab his arm to thank him and ask what they should do. Sai was unsure of what to tell her at that moment, as it was not really of his own concern what happened. His loyalty was to Danzo and the Foundation. He had no reason to get involved. At least, that's what he thought. However, before he had a chance to decide, they would be attacked by one of the Paths of Pain, the user capable of summoning large animals. Now seeing as he wouldn't have a choice to leave, Sai would tell Ino to stand behind him, as he would use his Super Beast scroll to engage with the large-like summonings, attempting to fight off one of the paths. Ino would be in awe of Sai as he fought, showing his true skill as a shinobi. However, all the same, there was only so much that he could do against large-like animals. As more destruction befell them, Sai could see that they were in a no-win situation. He would create a diversion and retreat with Ino, picking her up as the two would attempt to escape. However, before they could get too far, the large rhino summoning would lash out, slashing with its large horn. Sai would move to push Ino out of the way as the horn slashed his back, the two falling deeper under the debris and destruction. Ino would yell out to Sai, as it would appear as if he were crushed under one of the falling buildings. Ino would rush to try to save him, as the large rhino summoning would leave. As the battle with Satomi and Danzo would continue on, Danzo would continue to goad at Satomi, noting that she did not stand a chance against him, and that it was for the sake of the village that the Uchiha had to be destroyed once and for all, the cursed clan. Satomi could feel herself losing her composure, her imperfect Susanoo fading in and out, however still burning in its prime of strength. The more she relied on her Mangekyo Sharingan, the more she could feel the pain, as her eyes would begin to bleed, her head feeling as if it were suffering from multiple migraines. She knew that it wouldn't be too long before eventually she lost it, and her brother was no close to awakening anytime soon. Danzo would narrowly slip past Satomi as he would make his way towards Itachi, aiming to take out the fallen Uchiha. Satomi would rush to try to intercept Danzo, but it would appear as if she had gotten there too late, as Danzo would send his attack at the bed of Itachi. The bed would appear to burst into flames, Satomi now feeling as if she had lost the last of her family. She would cry out for Itachi, as Danzo would have a grin on his face, believing that he had rid himself of his problem. However, amongst the flames, a burst of crows would fly out. Danzo's eyes would begin to open in sheer horror, as he understood at that moment the fight was indeed not over, as right behind him, Itachi would be standing, his eyes also in use of the Mangekyo. Having recovered from his illness, and while not at 100%, he was still more than capable of holding his own. As Satomi had tears of joy, Itachi would look to her, telling her that she needed to keep a closer eye on things, and that even for as hard as she had trained, she had not learned to see through deception completely. In the end, they only saw what he wanted them to see. As Danzo would try to turn around once again, Itachi would now be covered in his own complete Susanoo, shielding Satomi as she stood behind him, the brother and sister pair working as one against Danzo. Danzo thought about using Shishui's eye to cast Koto Amatsukami, but he knew that it wouldn't be possible. As he could not find the other eye of Shishui, he knew in all likelihood that Itachi was the one that had it. In the end, it would be nothing more but a stalemate. His only option was to simply outpower the two. However, this would prove to be a fruitless attempt, as Itachi would show truly who was the master of the Sharingan, and that Danzo was nothing more but a cheap impersonator. That in the end, he did not understand the Sharingan. He was just simply a senile old man that craved power, and his lust for power would be his own demise. Itachi would effortlessly dispatch of Danzo over and over again, until eventually Danzo would be left with no way out, with no options. Believing that the only thing he could do was drag the other two to his grave, he would attempt to use the suicide seal. However, before he could activate it, Itachi would beat him to the punch, launching a kunai directly towards his spinal cord. He would sever his nerves, causing him to fall to the ground, unable to move and completely paralyzed. Itachi would use Amaterasu to burn away the seal on Danzo's body. Now completely immobile, they would get to work in removing the Sharingans from his arm, and Itachi would personally rip Shishui's eye from Danzo's skull. He would cry out, but he could feel almost no pain at his bottom half. Now believing that he had nowhere to go, they would bind him and hold him in place. Danzo's guards would have been defeated as well, now leaving only the brother and sister duo. They would turn back to the village, and Itachi would look to the sky. He would yell for Satomi to get behind him, as he would activate his Susanoo once again, using the Yaramir as a shield, as a large flash would be seen in the sky, and a great burst of wind would shoot in every direction, as a large explosion would completely wipe away the village. Satomi would block away from the look of the destruction. However, as the dust would begin to settle, and as the two would look on, they would see from their far distance that the village was no more. Itachi couldn't believe that pain would do such a thing, that his hatred for the Leaf Village ran that deep, that he would actually go this far to destroy it. They would take Danzo on their shoulders as they would rush back towards the village to try to save whomever they could. Satomi worrying if Naruto had been in that blast. It spurred her on to rush forward even faster, almost to the point where Itachi couldn't keep up. However, unknown to the two Uchiha, Naruto had arrived in the village. He was currently engaging with pain in the other paths, while Sakura would be at the side of Lady Tsunade. Satomi and Itachi would soon arrive to her side as well. while Tsunade's Anbu guard would be attempting to take down Itachi. Tsunade would wave them off, stating that Itachi had been granted a pardon. While it wasn't in writing, she made it perfectly clear that Itachi was not the enemy at the moment, and that they needed to focus on trying to aid Naruto. She would look to see that Danzo was on Itachi's shoulders, and she would ask what had he done. They would explain in detail before Tsunade would pass away, drifting into a coma as she had overused her chakra. The other members of the Anbu would be horrified to hear what Danzo had done. However, as they looked at his body, they could see as clear as day the evidence that was implanted in his right arm. There was no limits to his treachery. In the meantime, Katsuya, the slug, would explain to them what was happening with Naruto, as he were fighting off against the paths on his own, now having learned Sage Mode. Without hesitation, and although exhausted, Satomi would rush to the battlefield, much to the behest of the others. Itachi wanted to go after her, but he still stood by to help with the others in trying to save whoever they could in the village. Satomi would rush quickly to fight beside Naruto, using every bit of her strength to carry her forward. Naruto in the meantime would be holding his own against the paths of pain. He had already managed to take 2 of them down and was working on the 3rd. However, before they had a chance to pin him down, Satomi would come flying into the air with her sword, blocking one of the attacks as she pushed back at the paths of pain. Naruto would be surprised that Satomi had made it there so quickly, as she would rush to ask if he were alright. He would tell her that everything were fine, but that now they just had to stay focused on defeating pain once and for all. The two would stand at the ready, Satomi using the last of her Mangekyo Sharingan, and Naruto now equipped with Sage Mode. They would work together, showing the true depths of their teamwork. As Naruto would attempt to use the Rasen Shuriken, Satomi would aid it by infusing it with some of her own Amaterasu, as the black flames would spin around the Rasen Shuriken, forming a new blaze of black flame that would decimate 2 of the other paths. They would eventually bring down their numbers, until eventually only the Diva path remained. Pain was not at all nervous at the moment. He believed he had come too far to stop now, and he could recognize that while the 2 of them were working well together, they were on their last legs. Satomi would attempt to take out Pain. However, what she was not prepared for was his almighty push. Satomi would just barely create her imperfect Susanoo to shield her, as both she and Naruto were pushed back halfway across the field. From what they had been able to learn, the almighty push and almighty pull had an interval of about 5 seconds, and even still, they had to make sure that they could create an opening fast enough for them to get to the path. This was when Naruto would come up with his plan. Having lost his Sage Mode, he would create a multitude of shadow clones that would all begin to rush towards Pain. Pain would wait until the next interval, as he would use the almighty push once again to push away at all of the clones, creating a thick layer of dust and smoke. As he would rest back down, he was assured that with the amount of time that he had pushed them all back, Satomi and Naruto would not be able to get to him before the next interval, meaning that he could blast them away in another 5 seconds. Thinking that Naruto was no longer able to use Sage Mode, He believed that he had been able to gain the victory. However, unknown to Pain, Naruto did indeed have one more clone capable of using Sage Mode. As he unsummoned it, he regained it once again, as he picked up Satomi, telling her to finish him off. He would launch her with his increased strength, throwing her with precision. As Satomi kept her Sharingan focused, she would weave the hand signs to form the lightning blade. As Pain would look through the cloud of smoke, Satomi would come bursting forth, as his inner clock ticked down to the 3-second mark. He could see Satomi lunging towards him, with the same jutsu that he had seen the one known as Kakashi of the Sharingan use on him earlier when the invasion first began. As she thrusted her hand with the lightning blade towards him, he believed that he could make it with just a second to spare. However, that 1 second would prove to be his downfall, as before he was able to use the almighty push once again, he could already feel the lightning blade piercing through his backside. Satomi had managed to get to him just in time. However, even still, this did not come without consequence, as even though she had managed to get close enough to deliver the lightning blade, at the same time, he had also created a chakra rod himself, piercing her in the lower abdomen. As Satomi would fall over to the ground, Naruto would rush to her side immediately, as both she and Pain would collapse. Naruto picking her up and seeing what had happened. Katsuya would tell Naruto to take her to the others, as Sakura was already working on healing those who were wounded. Naruto would create a shadow clone, and the clone would pick up Satomi, telling her that everything was going to be fine, as he rushed her over towards Sakura and the others. In the meantime, Naruto would attempt to find where the real Pain was, using one of his chakra receivers and piercing it into his own hand. He would use his Sage Mode to reverse track and find where Nagato was hiding. Once he found the location, he would decide to go alone, as he went forward to confront the true Pain. As the Naruto clone made it back to the others, he would put down Satomi as Sakura would begin to work on healing her, before disappearing before anyone could ask questions. Itachi would look to see if he could sense where Naruto had gone, but he couldn't find him. That was when the Katsuya slug with them would explain that Naruto had gone to where the real Pain was. Some of the others would be ready to go and help Naruto. However, Katsuya would explain that Naruto wanted to go and meet this Pain for himself. As much as they didn't like it, they respected Naruto's wishes and allowed him to face Pain. Naruto would still go on to meet Pain and have their discussion as before, learning of his backstory and of his connection to Jiraiya, before hearing Naruto and his own declaration for peace. Through his words, Nagato would slowly be convinced that Naruto might be the child of prophecy, the one capable of bringing peace to the shinobi world. And as a sign of good faith, he would use Rinne Rebirth to bring those who he had killed back to life. Upon doing so, Satomi, after having her wound healed, would see the other members of the village who had died slowly being brought back to life one by one. She would ask what had happened to Naruto, and Katsuya would explain that he had settled things with Pain. They would hear in detail all of what Naruto had done, and in her own way, Satomi couldn't help but be proud. As Naruto was making his way back home, Feeling immensely tired, he would fall onto Kakashi's back, who would have arrived to pick up his student, bringing him back home to the village, where all the villagers would be waiting to greet Naruto, happy to see that their hero had returned. Naruto would be crowded by many villagers, all cheering and celebrating and praising him for what he had done. And while Naruto were flattered by everyone, there was only one person that was on his mind at the moment, making sure that Satomi was okay. Satomi would have watched from the distance as everyone celebrated around Naruto, Itachi asking if she wanted to go down there, but she would shake her head, explaining that she didn't really like to be around large crowds, but that she was genuinely happy to see how much the village had changed. She remembered not too long ago how the villagers often looked down upon Naruto, but that now he was no longer seen as the monster or the demon. But now, the village was starting to see him the way that she had always seen him, as being nothing less than a hero. Naruto would slowly push his way through the crowds, as he would arrive to a private tent that would be in an undisclosed location. This tent would have the Hokage's elite Anbu guard all surrounding the area, only allowing Naruto to come in. As Naruto made his way inside, he would see two beds laid out. In one would be Tsunade, and in the other, Satomi. In the room would also be Itachi, as well as Sakura and Shizune. Naruto would be told of their status, and he would be relieved to know that they were alright. As Naruto would sit by Satomi's bedside, he would take her hand, as she would lightly look over to Naruto. Naruto could see that her eyesight was slowly starting to fade, and she would explain that he mostly looked like a blur to her, although she could probably tell that he looked as stupid as always. Naruto would have tears of relief, although she would bring up her hand to wipe away the tears from his eyes, assuring him that she wasn't going to die so easily, and that he better not fall anytime soon either. Itachi would explain to them that she were losing her eyesight due to the effects of the Mangekyo, and that he too were starting to feel its strain. The only way they were going to be able to repair their eyesight was going to be by having their eyes swapped. They would ask if anyone in the village would be capable of performing such a procedure, Shizune and Sakura explaining that they could be up for the task, but they would need time to prepare everything. And now the village would be caught in a mist of other political and other warlike concerns. While the Hidden Leaf village was dealing with the attack from Pain, the Hidden Cloud village also had their own gripes for concern. Their Jinchuriki, the Eight-Tails known as Killer Bee, had just narrowly escaped a fight with one of the members of the Akatsuki, the one known as Deidara of the Stone. Deidara proved to be a formidable adversary, one the Killer Bee could not take down so easily. However, for as powerful as Deidara was, his need for the theatrics often proved to be his own undoing, as he had chosen to attack Killer Bee, who was not too far from the Cloud Village. Once the Raikage was alerted of his younger brother being placed in danger, the Raikage rushed to his side immediately, as the duo of the unruly A and the unholy B would prove to be the ultimate combo, taking out the explosive ninja. With his defeat now at their hands, he had now called the 5 Kage summit. Raikage A, not too pleased with the Akatsuki, especially with the Stone Village and Inoki, for not getting their rogue shinobi under control. With the looming 5 Kage summit on the horizon, there were still many things that needed to be dealt with, such as Danzo and his treachery, as well as who would be the Hokage interim, who would represent the hidden leaf at the summit. There was also the need of the Foundation, whose members had now been disbanded, some going back to their own previous clans, as Danzo's curse seal was no longer on them. Among them being Terune Aburame and Fu Yamanaka, who decided that they were going to go back to their respective clans, as they had nothing better to do. And Terune thought it would be cool to see his young cousin, Shino. As Fu was preparing to leave, he would see that Sai had nowhere to go. And Fu, thinking that they had a few extra spots at his place, he would tell Sai to come along with him. Sai would agree and would leave to go with Fu Yamanaka back to the Yamanaka clan. Once he arrived, he would be surprised as he would meet the young girl that he had saved during the attack, that being Ino Yamanaka. In the meantime, it was ultimately decided that Kakashi would serve as the interim Hokage, and that he would be the one to represent the Hidden Leaf Village at the 5 Kage Summit that would be held in the Land of Iron, home of the samurai. As Kakashi was preparing to leave, although he didn't really feel too fond of going, he would take Might Guy and Rock Lee to be his 2 guards, Hinata giving Rock Lee a kiss on the cheek before he left, and Lee happy to see that Hinata was alright, although he did curse himself for not arriving much sooner when the village needed him. He was thankful though to Naruto and Satomi for being able to step in and help when the village needed them. As Kakashi was preparing to leave, he would tap Naruto on the shoulder, telling him that the village would be in his hands while he was gone, since at that moment, Naruto would effectively be the strongest shinobi that the village in the Leaves had, and he would be the only one capable of standing firm against any threat that was to arrive. Naruto would be immensely determined, now knowing that Kakashi was putting the fate of the village in his hands, almost making him like a Hokage in a way. As Kakashi, Guy, and Lee would head to the 5 Kage Summit, Naruto would talk with Itachi for a bit, as the preparations were being made for the operation, so that he and Satomi could have their eyes swapped, thus allowing them to gain the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. As Naruto would help Yamato and the others in the village reconstruct many of the destroyed buildings, the 5 Kage would make their way to the Land of Iron, as they had a lot to discuss. However, unknown to the 5 Kage, there was another who would be paying them a visit, one known only as Madara Uchiha. This concludes Naruto Yokai Shippuden, What If Saskue Uchiha Was a Girl? Part 4. For all this and more, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so that you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcasting that is to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for Part 5 that will be coming out tomorrow as we continue on with this series throughout the week. And also stay tuned for other videos, openings, trailers, and all that more. And continue to watch that community tab at all times. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.